What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest edition of No Mercy with yours truly, Stephen A. Smith, coming at you as I love to do, usually at the very least every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Sometimes there are alterations, as in yesterday when I was not available because I've been covering a whole bunch of stuff and being on a book tour and everything like that. I barely had a chance to breathe and go to the toilet, let alone do a podcast. But I'm back. I'm right here in the studio thanks to our official studio sponsor, FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is the official sports betting company of the No Mercy podcast. I want to talk to you today about principles. The reason I want to talk to you about principles is because, damn it, most people don't have enough of them. They say they do, but they don't. And by the way, none of us are immune to being innocent of such assertions. I think I'm a very principled man. Damn it, I've compromised them from time to time in my life, as I'm sure you have, as I'm sure everybody has. But when we think about our true heroes in our society, our true heroes could be Dr. Martin Luther King. To a lot of people, it's Malcolm X. It's Nelson Mandela. The list goes on and on. Mahatma Gandhi, for crying out loud. There's a whole bunch of people that we could look at and we could say these were principled individuals. You know why? Because they were willing to stand up and pay the ultimate price. In the sports world today, our modern definition of a principled individual who made a tremendous sacrifice is Colin Kaepernick. In the past, it was Muhammad Ali, who refused to enter the armed services and enter the Vietnam War on behalf of the United States of America. Because as he said back then, no Viet Cong ever called me the N-word. And he said the N-word. I just said the N-word. He said what it is. Principles are important. They make you, they drive you. If more people stood on their beliefs, just imagine for a second what our society could be. These are all things that we know. Very, very few people. We talk about courage, but very few of us have it. Most of us are a bunch of damn punks. Wusses. Scared of our own damn shadow. Some of us have good reasons. You got a family to feed. You got children to take care of. You don't want your bottom line compromised and your quality of life severed. Fair enough. But others are heartless. And I don't mean heartless as in evil. I mean heartless as in being devoid of courage. We're scared shitless of our own damn shadow. Because anything that would potentially upset an apple cart, the proverbial apple cart, we're scared to death. You know, some people would even say one of those people is not Kyrie Irving. I've been very, very critical of Kyrie Irving because, damn it, show up to work. Tired of you collecting that damn money and you don't show up to play. That was my argument against him last season. I ain't say that about him this season. And yeah, it wasn't the wisest thing in the world for him to put a link to a film that the Jewish community labeled and interpreted as anti-Semitic. No, that was not wise. That was not smart at all. But I will tell you this. From speaking about issues of humanity to bringing up the WNBA and the need to help them be on chartered jets as opposed to flying commercial like they do and all of this other stuff. Kyrie Irving has tackled an abundance of issues in recent years that most professional athletes wouldn't dare have the courage to do. So in that regard, strictly in that regard, got to give respect where respect is due. But I don't know if there's anybody, and that includes Colin Kaepernick, that we could argue deserves more credit for courage than former NBA player Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. I don't know. Didn't want to stand for the national anthem. Brought hell down upon him. Clearly cost him his career. If you watched him play, you knew he wasn't finished. When he was in college, his name was Chris Jackson. He was an All-American, averaging 30. 30. That Chris Jackson. That Chris Jackson that was in college basketball when the Kenny Andersons and the Bobby Hurleys of the world were playing college basketball. That brother. He had a lot of courage. A lot of us didn't take the time to find out why. Not really. Well, you know something? We're going to do that right now. He's got a hell of a story to tell. He's got a sports documentary film coming out, debuting February 3rd on Showtime. It's entitled Stand. And it is appropriate because the one thing this brother can never be accused of is sitting down and not taking a stand. We can't say that about him. You'll find out why in a minute. Stick around. You're listening to No Mercy with Stephen A. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back with more in a minute. People talk about changing their ways for the new year throughout January, but it's not like you can't keep changing the rest of the year, you know. And with Harry's, you can change your look up with the highest, and I mean highest quality razors in the game. Give yourself that soul patch, please. Tighten up those sideburns and do it all with Harry's. I got their trial set, by the way, and I got to tell you, these are different from other razors. You can tell the difference, and the difference is that these blades are made in Harry's own factory. They're tight, y'all, real smooth, makes the goatee look pretty damn nice. That's why I'm flowing with it, okay? Harry's got the highest customer satisfaction in the shaving industry, in case you didn't know. And even with that, they still offer you a no-risk trial. So if you don't like your shave, which would very much come as a surprise to me, then no worries. We can do something about that. It's on them. No matter how new your new you is, look sharp all year long with Harry's. Get a $15 Truman Shave trial set for just $3 at harrys.com/mercy. That's harrys.com/mercy for a $3 trial set. It is my honor and privilege to have my next guest with me. I'm here in our New York studios. This brother, as far as I'm concerned, was a superstar basketball player. I don't care what anybody says. I know what I saw at LSU. I know what I saw in the NBA. I know what I saw when people like Kenny Anderson and others were playing college basketball, but this brother busted onto the scene and was dropping 30 a game in college. The man formerly known as Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. It's been a while, my brother. How have you been?
I've been great. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you. First things first, how you doing? How's life? How's everything been going?
I won't complain. It could be better and worse, but we don't complain.
I got you. You're sitting here with me right now because you've got a sports documentary film entitled Stand that premieres February 3rd on Showtime. Talk to me about that right now. What is that about?
Stand is about my life. I'm moments of vulnerability. I'm raw. How I navigate through faith, how I navigate through growing up in poverty, feeling like I've been miseducated, misinformed, and going through that, maneuvering through that, educating myself, growing up with Tourette syndrome, the mental challenges that I faced, the struggles with making a decision, social, political decision, and then the effects of that on me financially, on my family. Not knowing my father, bits and pieces of what a lot of people, some areas in their life go through that somebody can get something from.
It's been a while since a lot of people have seen you. I know we see you playing Big Three basketball. I know that we know that you was playing overseas and playing in Russia and stuff like that, but it's been a while since a lot of people have seen you. Why now? Why come out with this sports documentary film now?
You know what? I've been telling my story for a while, and I've had a lot of people say that it's a story that needed to be told. But at the same time, I think when I was younger, I had something to say, but I've lived. I'm 53. I've traveled. I've experienced. I've read more, and so I feel I'm in a better place right now to articulate it. Much different than I would have been then. And at the same time, so much has changed in a sense with athletes speaking out, Kaepernick, and time is short. Tomorrow's not guaranteed.
What hesitancy specifically did you have beforehand? I mean, I know that you just alluded to it, but could you be more specific in terms of what reticence, what level of hesitancy did you have when you thought about it and said, okay, I've been telling my story, but to get to a point right now where I'm going to push this and ultimately Showtime is going to grab a hold of this and we're going to tell this story through my lens. Now's the time more than ever before. Why wasn't the time before?
Well, again, what I just said, but also, I've had my stories, I've told my story so many times, and often I felt that it was butchered. It wasn't told correctly. And I was comfortable with some of the people. Teams are important. And so we've had some people that I felt comfortable with that was going to push it to make sure that it was told the way I wanted to tell it.
I'm remembering, and I'm just, listen, let me go back and rewind the clock just a little bit because, you wasn't a dude that would dribble the ball excessively, throw it behind your back between your legs 1,000 times before you threw in a finger roll or whatever. You'd sit up there, put it through your legs once, cross over, and launch from three. You scored 55 points in a game. You scored over 50 in another. I think it was against Florida that you dropped 50 one time. You averaged 30 as a freshman. You were All-American. You was absolutely something special. When you reflect back to who you were and what you were at that particular moment in time in your life, what would you describe yourself to be?
I was basketball centered. I looked at myself outside of basketball. I didn't see a future for myself academically. I looked at myself outside of that as being inadequate, somewhat of an inferiority complex. Part of that was because of my upbringing. I always say that your environment has a way of molding and shaping you. And so the fact that my mother, they can't give you what they don't have. So educationally, and then you're looking at your surroundings. And when you look at television, most of the image they show you of people with money and wealth, actors, entertainers, musicians. And so I knew I had fast twitch muscles and athletic ability. That's what I strove for. And I knew that this was going to have to be my story, that if I'm going to make it, I'm going to have to put everything into this game of basketball.
Was there anything as you reflect on that period of time, being a former teammate of Shaquille O'Neal, Stanley Roberts, guys like that? See, I remember this stuff, man, because I loved y'all. I loved you. I couldn't believe Georgia Tech took y'all out. I thought Lethal Weapon 3, Kenny Anderson, Brian Oliver, Dennis Scott, I didn't even think they would beat y'all because I just thought y'all were just too big and you were too gifted. I thought y'all would beat them. But when you think about the relationships that you had off the basketball court, Dale, with the coach that you had, with Shaquille O'Neal as a teammate, what kind of influence, if any at all, did they have on you as you reflect back to who you were back then and what you ultimately became known, you became known to be?
Yeah, well, that's a deep question. I haven't looked at it so much in terms of the players, but I'm sure that there's some benefits from that. Shaquille was a workaholic. He worked hard. I think with Shaquille, he had insight. He was, I remember being in the dorm room, and he said, I'm going to be the first player that makes $80 million with a basketball contract. He's made much more than that.
Right.
But he was confident, and seemed to be for sure about himself. And I think a lot of that came from the fact of his stepfather and his mother, how he was raised. But Dale Brown, for me, I think the most critical thing he ever did for me was give me the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that just took me on a whole nother level.
Before I ask you about the impact of the autobiography of Malcolm X, why did Dale Brown elect to give you that autobiography? Did he give it to the team or was it just you? And if it was just you, why you?
It was just me.
Okay.
And I asked him that years later. And he said he don't know. And I said to him, well, could it be because he would always allude to the fact that I would do interviews. And sometimes he would check me in front of him. They said, man, tell him how you really feel. And so I think because I came from Mississippi and I always carried myself with humility, soft-spoken, that he looked at that as being too passive. And he was, and I said, could it be that you gave that to me because Malcolm wasn't passive and you wanted me to get something of what he had? He said, you know what? I could see that. But he, outside of me offering that information, he doesn't know why he gave it to me.
Again, before I get into Malcolm X and the impact that autobiography had on you, when you talk about how you were, you weren't too aggressive, that you weren't too outspoken, do you believe that was because of your upbringing, because of what insecurities you had, or was it because you was growing up in Mississippi?
Both, no question.
I'm a grown man, and I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm nervous when I'm rolling through Mississippi.
Listen, a lot of people are. Your environment has a way of molding and shaping you. The information you receive, the images, so for sure. And seeing my parents or my mother and my uncles and aunts, and how during that time the relationship was, and in private they were bold, they were brass, but in public, in front of white people, head would go down. And I saw myself developing those same mannerisms. But I knew that I didn't like it. And I said, man, I don't like the way this feels. But I didn't know necessarily, how to get out of it. And so, I saw that I was that person. When it was something that I saw, I would get nervous. So I wanted to confront authority. I would get nervous. I said, man, I gotta find a way. I gotta find a way. So that definitely impacted the way I began to carry myself and see the way. My first confrontation with authority was when my head coach, I found out that they were hiding my letters, and I missed a prestigious camp. I think at the time in South Carolina.
Are you talking about when you were in high school getting ready to go to college and you found out your coach was hiding the letters?
Yep. All the letters came to the high school. And then someone caught wind that I was invited to the Nike camp. And I almost missed it. And so I had to confront him. And now you mess with my livelihood.
Right.
And I mean, I'm busting my, what, trying to survive, trying to make it. So I confronted him and I told him, look, I'm not coming to ask your permission. I said, I'm coming to let you know I'm aware of what you did. I don't like it. I wasn't diplomatic. I didn't have no diplomacy. And I said, I'm going to that camp. And if I wouldn't have went to that camp, I wouldn't have played against Jordan. I wouldn't have ended up becoming the number one guard in the nation. And and they had a rule that Mississippi had a rule that if I went, I had to pay my way, even though Nike was paying my way.
Wow.
That if I paid my way, that I would be ineligible to play high school basketball. And then after Dr. Dunn, this doctor put money in my mother's account for me to go. Going, they say you can't bring back any paraphernalia. So I've been bitter. I'm still bitter with Mississippi because I think about all the athletes that they could have destroyed.
Wow. And they tried to do it to you and they didn't get away with it. What was that coach's excuse for keeping those letters of intent from you?
He said to me, almost verbatim, he said, you can get just as much, if not more, notoriety in the state of Mississippi. I said, man, get out of here with that. I said, this is the most prestigious camp in the nation with 110 of the top high school basketball players at that camp. Coaches from all over the country going to be there. There's nowhere in the world I'm going to have that type of notoriety. And then he just shut up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's get to the autobiography of Malcolm X, because doing my research on you, they talked about how it had such a profound impact on your life and helped shape and formulate the man you would ultimately become. Explain that.
Man, look, he was, the truth meant more to him, I think, than anything. And this is what I got from his life. And he wasn't afraid to also admit that he was wrong after all of those years. But also he was courageous. And he didn't mind speaking the truth to power, as they say. And that's something that I didn't have. And it's something that I wanted, because I didn't want I felt that if my life, when it's all said and done, if all you can remember is, man, that dude had a mean crossover and a quick release, he can put points on the board, to me that's a wasted life. And he encouraged me to begin to think and analyze my surroundings and the world around me. And I started taking steps to learn how to tell people no, tell them what I think, sitting with that discomfort, and then coming back. And I started seeing the benefits of it. And from the reading, you gain confidence, because you start sharing information.
Right.
A lot of people think like you. They're similar. And so that develops confidence. Confidence grows into courage. Then the courage grows, and you know what? I got to do something with this. Because there's a saying in Quran that don't be like a donkey with books on your back. Right. You got all that knowledge and you're not putting it to use. And so Malcolm helped that transition for me. And then I just began to read almost anything I could put my hands on.
March of 1996. It's my rookie year covering the NBA. You got yourself embroiled in that controversy because you refused to stand for the national anthem.
Yeah.
We know that Commissioner Stern, God rest his soul, lost his mind over that. Advertisers and sponsors lost their mind over that. You were docked a game or a couple of games pay, if I remember correct. I think right at the time it was like $31,000 a game, for crying out loud, something along those lines. And you wouldn't budge, at least initially. Why did you take that position at that time? Was it because of this epiphany? Was it because of the reading of Malcolm X's autobiography? Was it something else? What was your reasoning for taking that position at that particular moment in time? What was going on with you?
Yeah, actually, it was like 4 months or so the previous season.
Yeah.
And then the next season, they caught on to it.
Got you.
But, yeah, Malcolm was the catalyst. But then after that, the large part of my education came from when I was in the league, traveling on the road. Mostly every city I went to, being a Muslim, man, people find out, and they're excited. And so I'm a people's person. So if I felt good about you, I would invite you to the road. All you had to say was salaam alaikum, you come to my room. I know better now. Right. It takes more than that. But through that process, man, mostly every city we would stay up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I would order room service. Some people have an academic discipline in history, some social sciences, political science, and they would introduce me to books and authors I've never heard, the Noam Chomsky's, Howard Zinn's, Gore Vidal's, Randall Robinson's, Kwanzaa Kunjufu's, and I'm give it to me. Because at this time, like, I'm thirsty.
Right.
I've never, and I'm being exposed to things is just fascinating me, but also making me angry because I feel like I've been cheated educationally. Right. Because I didn't know that basketball, I knew, but not to the extent that statistically I had a better chance of becoming a doctor and a lawyer.
Well, see, that's where I was going with it. I was like, you're a black man in America. I'm like, are you telling me that you didn't know that you felt cheated until then? Because I'm like, it's like we come out of the womb knowing we've been cheated, that we're operating behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, but you're talking about Mississippi
Gotcha.
As opposed to a bigger city.
Gotcha.
And you talking about upbringing. You talk about growing up in a family that's already miseducated. Mm-hmm. And you got your surroundings are pretty much that way. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, something ain't right. Mostly every community we go to, this ghetto is mostly us. Yeah. Things across the bridge is mostly them. Yeah. But you're taught and conditioned, this is the way it is. Mm. Just play the game, be quiet. Mm. But you don't know that it's systemic.
Gotcha.
Or a system behind it. And so this is what, after the reading, I'm like, wow, this has been in the making since the evolution of this country. And it hasn't really changed. Mm. Like if you look at the 30s, 40s, 50s, and you listen to the conversations, look at what people were fighting for. Right. And you look at the conversations now, if you put the color in the black and white, and you would know the difference. And I was like, I can't roll with that. Mm. And so after reading all of that, and then reading what my religion tells me about standing up for justice, even if it's against yourself. You can't be for God and justice and injustice at the same time. We give our allegiance on so many verses. And then I'm looking at the history, even prophethood, even the people that we admire, like Jesus today. Mm-hmm. Jesus would be considered a domestic extremist. Mm-hmm. All the prophets would, because they took positions against power. Yeah. So I'm like, man, when I die, this is what I want my life to say for itself, that I stood for something. Because that basketball, like a preacher once said, he's never heard of a U-Haul on back of a hearse. Right. Can't take it with you. Yeah. And so that caused me to look at things differently. And I know what it feels like to be poor. I know what it feels like to be misdiagnosed. And, living in a society where you got over 40 million people without medical care, but we're supposed to look at America like it's exceptional.
Greatest country in the world.
Right. And then when it makes mistakes, it's innocent. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, this don't sit well for me. This don't sit well with me.
So I'm asking that, and I'm glad you said that, because my whole point is the national anthem itself, why that stands, as opposed to something else. Because I'm not saying it was wrong. Please don't get me wrong. I have no problem with it. I just want to. I want to know.
You. And everybody has their right to their opinion.
That's right.
And I understand that. I don't have to respect it, but I understand it. But the American flag, as well as the American anthem, could be considered the most recognized and most revered symbol that represents what America stands for. Even becoming a citizen in this country, you have to recite a racist national anthem written by a slave owner. Mm-hmm. You have to recite it's militaristic. You have to recite certain important battles just to gain citizenship. So I knew that this is a symbol that people hold dear to them by far. And still, when you look at what Kaepernick did, right? Anytime, whether it's black liberation movements, anti-socialist movements, etc., right? Decades earlier, they've understood that when you attack this symbol, it could mean murder, it could mean imprisonment, it could mean a slander for those who participate in doing that.
But what were you trying to accomplish? Were you trying to bring attention to the iniquities of this nation and using that issue to do it? Or is it something where you felt like highlighting this will be a source of healing for this nation? A healing they may not realize we really, really need.
Both.
Okay.
Both. Because look, a lot of times people, they look at these stances that people make, and they want to vilify right off. They want to condemn. They want to attack. All the diatribes and things associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't want to look deeper, and it's making decisions, taking risks like this also has to come from a place of love. I love myself enough, and I love humanity enough that I'm willing to take a risk. And when you look at all of those people, I don't think any of them were absent from that place. It's like Cornel West, I think, coined a phrase that justice is what love looks like in public.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So I wanted both. I wanted to bring light to it, but also, yeah, why wouldn't you want to heal a nation? Now, I don't think America will ever be healed.
Mm.
I really don't. You know, it's kind of like Randall Robinson in his book, Quitting America. He worked in Congress for years, you know, worked to free Amistad and Mandela and Season. He left. He said, man, America is incapable of change. Mm. And this is a person embedded in the system, highly intelligent. Mm. And so that's coming from a place. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to stop, even if it's in pockets, you know, because in Islam, there's a saying that to take one life unjustly, it's as though you killed all of humanity. But also the flip side of that, to save one life. Same thing with Martin Luther King. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Right.
Well, if injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, justice is a threat to injustice.
That's right.
So you can always flip it around. So that's just what I'm on. And I've been on that ever since I began to read and come across things and ask myself, what do you want your history, what do you want your life to say when it's all said?
How did you feel about how the NBA community and the sports world overall received your message? Whether they supported you enough or not? One can imagine that when you look at the power structure, of course they weren't receptive to it. But your contemporaries, your colleagues, your brethren, how do you feel it was embraced? Your position was embraced by them. Did you feel they were supportive enough?
You talking about the NBA as an institution, or you talking about the players in the NBA?
I'm talking about the players in the NBA. I'm not talking about the NBA because I know how the NBA felt about it. I mean, it don't take rocket science to know what they felt about it.
Just making sure.
They thinking big business. We know that. We're talking about, advertisers, sponsors, and not wanting to stand for the national anthem. It's predictable what position they're going to take.
Exactly.
But I'm wondering at that time, before I get into Kaepernick, because I'm going to transition to that in a second, I'm wondering at that time in your mind, how receptive were your contemporaries towards the message that you were trying to disseminate, and how supportive were they of you in your eyes? And I'm not just talking about NBA players. I'm talking about professional athletes, period.
Yeah. I think there's two ways to look at it, or more than two. In private, I think most of them are very receptive because we have these conversations all the time, barbershop conversations, on the bus, on the plane. Right. So, and most of us come from the same socioeconomic backgrounds. So in private, it's a different language. Publicly is when things change. And so, and I wasn't surprised that in mass, that most didn't come out and say anything. Why? Because, look, history is oftentimes a clear indication of what's going to happen in the present and the future. And so history has shown that anytime something like this happens and somebody speaks out, the majority will not respond. Until later, in words, man, we love Martin Luther King. We love Malcolm X. So I wasn't surprised. I was more disappointed that I'm hoping that, you call it delusional hope, whatever. I'm like, man, because you have these conversations, like we're tough in private.
That's right.
But in public is a whole different story. So I was disappointed, but pleased that there were players not just on my team, but outside. Shaq, Michael Jordan even said something,
right?
In support. Came out and weren't afraid to articulate their support for me. But it was disappointing.
Did you feel at that moment that your NBA career, your days were numbered?
Yes and no. I felt a part of me, again, delusional hope. I'm like, look, what's done is done. I expressed myself, not that it's going to stop, but I'm a professional. I'm going to keep coming. I'm going to keep playing. And it's about production. Again, hoping that things, but a part of me, because of history, is like, I wouldn't be surprised. And initially, when it happened, I'm not quick to rush to accusing somebody of blackballing.
Right.
Just like if a white person does something, not every time a white person do something to use it racial.
That's right.
But there's a tendency of us to do that. And so I sat back and I paid attention. And so I'm looking at, man, I'm traded. I didn't know at the time, but now I do, that they had a poll in Denver. John Elway is loved tremendously, but I was the most popular athlete in Denver. I'm a people person. I get out, I talk to people.
Right.
Then my minutes started to decline. Then they put me in and taking me out. Life is rhythm. Basketball is rhythm.
That's right.
You see Gary Payton, you see Mitch Richmond, you see people go to L.A. under Kobe, don't get that ball, they ain't the same player.
They ain't the same player.
Right, because they're used to getting it.
Right.
And then they come out with, I'm hearing coaches in the locker room say, man, why aren't they playing this dude? We organize our defenses around him. Then they come out with this special about top free throws and shooters in the league. I'm in it. I'm not one time seen. Sounds to me, and there's relationships in everything. And so there's a country club atmosphere too. And then we call Coangelo, my agent at the time, Sharif. I'm in my prime. Now I'm just coming off of numbers before this thing hits.
Right.
And before he can even finish, Coangelo, president at the time of Phoenix.
Jerry Colangelo. Yes.
Stops him in his tracks. Said, man, we not interested. And it has nothing to do with his basketball either. I said, boy, I wish I could have had that on audio.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's why then I said, you know what? Yeah, this is intentional. Yeah, even going into the summer league with Elgin Baylor, calling me, say, hey.
Clippers at the time, running the
Clippers
Clippers.
at the time.
Yep.
Guy said, man, Elgin Baylor want to talk to you. We're looking for a guard. I come, sitting in the stands. I'm watching Elgin Baylor from a distance. He's watching me. I'm like, man, in my mind, I'm like, what's taking so long? The guy comes back to me, said, Mahmoud, I apologize. I said, for what? He said, man, I know I called you here and we were interested. He said, but Elgin Baylor said that he don't want to talk on account of what you said on HBO. And I just chuckled.
And what did you say on HBO to remind our listeners?
Well, HBO, viewers? I did an interview. This is right after I left Vancouver. And it was right after 9/11.
Vancouver Grizzlies.
Yep. And Bernard Goldberg came and interviewed me. And he asked me some questions about a lot of things, about the house burning down, about what I felt. And I presented some questions that I know that the media gets. You got a choice to present it or not present it.
Right.
And I was posing those questions to him, whether it's the money that was traded before the event. I said, that's suspicious. I said, that should be delved into. Don't you think the public have a right to know that? I talked about the person is an Australian,
okay,
who happened to be a Jewish guy.
Okay.
This was the news, that he took out 2 insurance policies before that happened. I said, don't you think that's suspicious before that happened? And then there's so many things that I gave him a list on. And so after that, and then I'm talking about the 9 individuals that was on the other side of Manhattan, 5 were deported back to Israel as being part of Mossad, right? I'm talking about, I'm giving a laundry list of stuff. I said, now don't you think this is interesting though? I mean, this should be presented instead of just presenting this side. And so we went into it back and forth. And so after that, of course, anytime you mention anything, because even anything Jewish, or I think this word even with Kyrie, has been so weaponized historically.
Anti-Semitism, yes.
Yeah, it's been so weaponized, right?
I mean, and by the way, it's weaponized by people who ain't even Jewish. The Anti-Defamation League, I interviewed Jonathan Greenblatt, the president of the Anti-Defamation League. He was like, we didn't call for Kyrie Irving to be suspended. We didn't call for these conditions to be met in order for him to return to basketball. We had nothing to do with that. So you had a whole bunch of people that weren't even a part of the Jewish community jumping up and trying to implement stipulations to be appeased by Kyrie Irving, and they weren't even the quote unquote offended party.
Yeah, and then you have some in the group that doing it too. So it goes both ways.
But at the end of the day, here's the deal. So we fast forward because your story, the way that you just articulated, sounds eerily similar to what a vast majority of folks believe has happened to Colin Kaepernick. Now, you know Colin Kaepernick. I believe that you wrote a book. It was under his imprint, if I remember correctly. How much do you believe his story mirrors yours?
And there's definitely some similarities. The stand that he took, social justice stand, using the anthem and the flag to bring attention to it, how his minutes began to decline, how the language shifted. Don't know if he have it anymore. I'm saying, and I knew that from the door because you see the playbook historically, right? I know the playbook. And so I said this to a lot of people even before it happened. I said, watch what happens now. And the same thing I saw happen to him. The only difference, though, is this is at a time when there's social media.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that then.
That's
so
true.
It's not so easy, in a sense, to control the narrative the way it was then. And so you could see the support more so. Even when I was coming out, there was death threats, there was hate mail. But I had just as much, if not more, supportive mail from natives, from Jews, Christians, atheists, agnostics, white, black, men, women, like, man, I agree with you in breaking down history, right? And I'm sure they were getting it, but they had a choice where I'm gonna show that and not show that.
Right.
So social media changed that. And it wasn't until talking to, what's his name, Dr. Harry Edwards.
Okay.
That I never saw it this way. This is why he's who he is. He said, when Muhammad Ali did what he did, it was under the Black Power movement. It was easy to tag along and frame it. When Kaepernick did what he did, it was under the Black Lives Matter movement. He said, when you and Craig did what you did, there was no movement.
Talking about Craig Hodges. That's right.
He said, there was no movement. It's like you were in an ocean with no paddle all along. I said, wow, I never saw it.
Craig
like
Hodges, former shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
That was very, very instrumental in the early part of Michael Jordan's championship years. Well, go ahead.
No. So, yeah.
When you think about Colin Kaepernick and what he's had to endure, and you just brought up the social media aspect, what would Mahmoud Abdul Rauf's life be like today if he did what he did during a time when social media was so prevalent the way that it is now?
It would probably be similar to, in a sense, Kyrie. And I say that because, I think the NBA projects itself as being progressive. And I've said this for a while. Now, if you compare it to the NFL, they're seemingly more progressive, seemingly.
No question.
However, I think
NFL, NBA.
However, I think they're just more savvy. I really believe this. And I say that because just how they handle Kyrie. People can agree and disagree all they want. Kyrie posted something. And as far as what I was seeing, he was engaging the public, like what you think.
Yeah.
I don't think he didn't say anything, as far as I'm concerned, anti-Semitic. Now, one of my ex-teammates has a theater that played the same thing. Played the same movie, they ain't come down on him.
Right.
Amazon
refused to take down the movie, and Jeff Bezos keeps it up and is profiting off of people looking at it and watching it.
Exactly. So to answer your question, I don't think that in this day and age, Dave Zirin said something very instrumental. He said, it's the type of politics you espouse, right? The fact that...
He says the type, I say the type and the timing.
Yeah, well, I agree. No. I don't disagree. Type and timing. Craig Hodges, for example, the NBA has been having these social activist conversations. If things have changed so much, and I'm always pushing for others more than myself, I talked to Craig. Never once did the NBA call him to have these conversations, right? So that says something to me. Like, if you really change, reach back. And when what's his name, James Harden and Westbrook was in China, and they were about to answer a question, don't answer that. Yeah. But I thought you allowed your athletes to deal with these questions.
True. That's true. But you also know this, for better or worse, you know it all comes down to business.
Of course.
You know it's all about business.
But say that.
Right. Well, saying it might compromise your business.
Yeah, I get it.
So like you say, it's a decision you've got to make. It's a choice that you have to make. And when could we ever rely on corporate America to make those decisions? Never. I can't recall.
You can't because they're a part of it.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, they're a part of it. But this is my thing, though. Don't project yourself in this way when you know that that's not the case.
Got you.
Because some of us, we're not going to let it slide.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of players that's going to be silent. I get it. Who wants their career to be upset? I mean, to be affected? Who wants to lose money? They can't take care of their family.
Or you're just asking about the level of futility. Like, for example, on many, many occasions throughout my career, I want to speak out about a lot of things, and I usually do.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are some things that are just futile because even if you give voice to it, it just fades because nobody gravitates to it.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you're measuring, okay, what's the win here? Because you're winning this battle, but you're losing this war. And this war is more important than that little battle, so we make those decisions every day. A lot of people will look at it that way as well. In the end, last question to you. Because this sports documentary film, Stand, premiering on Showtime February 3rd, what do you want people to walk away taking from this, especially based on this conversation that you and I just had? What do you want them walking away and taking away from this?
You know what, man? Everybody has a story. Everybody have their experiences. And I think as human beings, we all share different experiences that resonate with people.
Right.
And so, like I said before, there are people out there struggling with their faith. There are people out there struggling with, being raised in certain conditions. There are people struggling with mental issues. There are people struggling with being labeled and disorders and being miseducated and not feeling like they have courage to articulate what they really believe inside themselves and take that risk. Whatever resonates with them. I'm just telling my story. Mm-hmm. And then I'm hoping that there's some part of that story that's going to make them think. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're telling stories and people can't leave with questions and it can't make them think deeper, you failed in storytelling.
I know you say that you're just telling your story, but just talking to you, obviously there's a hell of a lot more to your story than just this story.
Of course.
And so I'm wondering, is this going to be the last we hear from you? Because you got a lot to say, my brother. A lot of people need to hear what you have to say. Is this just the beginning of Mahmoud Abdul Rauf really coming out and really making sure that his voice is heard, particularly in this day and age where social media is so prevalent? You don't need the conventional status quo to disseminate your message. You have the ability to do it on your own. Should we expect to hear more from you in the days, the weeks, the months, and the years to come?
Education doesn't end and stories doesn't end. So definitely, I'm in the process of putting some other stuff together. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it, my brother.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time, man.
No, I appreciate you, man.
Stand. Showtime, February 3rd, sports documentary film. Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, former superstar, college basketball, NBA. The brother was something special. Make no mistake about it. I think you still got a little game. I was watching Big Three one time. I think you still got
They just got to play me a little bit more.
Still got a little game with you.
They just got to play. I appreciate it, man.
I don't care if you're a diehard NFL fan. I don't care if you barely know what football is. The Super Bowl is around the corner, so you better get ready. And this year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with the no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to player props. And in the Super Bowl, you've got to bet on more than that. Who's winning the first quarter? Who's scoring the first touchdown? I know my friends are going to be using FanDuel the whole game long. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. You'll be able to find all the bets you want to make in no time. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today with promo code MERCY to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's promo code MERCY. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable sportsbook bonus bets which expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369 in New York. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia.
Thanks again to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, former Denver Nugget, former Vancouver Grizzlies, former Sacramento King. He was a sensational basketball player, A superstar guard played college basketball with Shaquille O'Neal and Stanley Roberts, the Twin Towers that was supposed to win the national championship before they got knocked off by Lethal Weapon 3 at Georgia Tech. Dennis Scott, Brian Oliver, and of course the great homeboy himself from Queens, New York, Archbishop Malloy, Kenny Anderson. I'm grateful to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. Every now and then you run into somebody that just reminds you of the importance of being principled, that everything can't be about money. Certainly you got to make wise decisions. Certainly you don't want an issue to derail you to such a degree that you forget the priority to take care of one's family. When we live in a society that, your income can be eradicated and eviscerated at the drop of a mispronounced word or sentence or syllable or whatever the case may be. We understand that we're living in different times, but it doesn't mean that we need to be devoid of principles. And when he brings up the issues that he's brought up, whether it's about the national anthem, whether it's about corporate America, corporate greed and what have you, because in essence, to some degree, that's what he was talking about without directly saying it, because we were just conducting an interview. These are the kind of things we have to pay attention to. And every now and then, if not most of the time on this podcast, the objective is to get you to think about things you may have otherwise not thought about. To understand that when we go to work every day and we go about the business of putting forth our due diligence to be the best that we can be, to be inspirational and motivational, yet productive and efficient, it's incredibly important to understand that your principles shouldn't be thrown out the window in pursuit of those other things. On many, many occasions, without the threat of having to lose one's livelihood, you can be principled. You can take a stand. You can stand up against something rather than fall for everything. You can do these things and still maintain or elevate your quality of life. Mahmoud Abdul Rauf wasn't fortunate enough to be able to pull that off as an NBA player. But he's still here. He's still moving on. He's still taking positions. He's still highlighting and edifying us all. And he's still exhibiting a level of bravery that most of us aren't willing to tackle. I'd say that's inspirational. I'd say that's motivational. I hope y'all all go and watch Stand, which premieres February 3rd, this Friday, on Showtime. I know I'll be watching it. And I know when I think about taking a stand and I have some fear, some trepidation, or some hesitation, I know that he's going to be an inspiring source for me when I feel the need to do so anyway, despite that hesitancy. I'm just speaking for myself, but I'm quite sure, knowing y'all, I'm speaking for some of y'all too. Until next time, everybody, it's time for me to sign off. Peace and love until the next episode. Remember, you don't have to know sports to know mercy. I think Mahmoud Abdul Rauf taught us that lesson yet again. Hold on to it. Embrace it. And see what it does for you. Until next time, everybody, I'm out.